I would say this final boss is probably the hardest in the game. Really the only boss it's really actually more of just a really long fight. It's very tedious, at least with my strategy. But it was the first fight that I was like, okay, I really need to prepare for this. Now, I'm under leveled at like level 67. I think you're supposed to be a little bit higher, but I think that's around the minimum that you should be on hard mode. I'll try to show you the demons that I use to help me get some of the items that I'll use in my preparation. But in phase 1, there's only one weakness in phase 1, which is wind. Now thankfully I've been upgrading Saizo, and he is the Force Arcana, so he has the most powerful, he's the only one that can equip the most powerful Force augments. I have Force Augment 10 and Force Ferocity, which gives me higher chance of hitting a critical. So what I do in phase 1, and first of all, before I go into phase 1, this is what makes my strategy harder. I'm sure this is a more optimal strategy, but I'm not sure what it is at the moment. You probably just need to maybe farm and get to a higher level. But I had to switch around my mystiques in order to do this strategy. So I have basically 2 healers for phase 1. I'm using Arrow to use Reflect Physical, because that's going to be important. Unless you have 4 demons that are null against Gun, you need to repel Physical for this first phase. In fact, the first phase has 2 phases itself. So I do damage every 2 turns by concentrating with Saizo and then hitting with heavy force damage. I reflect the physical attacks, and I use Ringo with the healing augment to heal at least once a round typically. And I also had the food item that gives me increased healing effects. You can use something better than that if you need to. And Melody, I'm just being patient and doing physical damage or piercer until phase 2. I'm not going to show the entire fight because it's just entirely too long, but every 2 turns she's going to hit you with Almighty, and you can choose to guard with it with Melody and Ringo. You definitely don't want Ringo to be taken out. It's going to be more difficult to do anything that happens. Just keep repelling the gun attacks back, and if you get the right RNG, after, I don't know, 10 turns, something like that, you'll be in the second part of this phase if you're doing enough damage. And the second part of this first phase, it's going to actually become easier. As long as you debuff, which is actually what makes the first part so hard, because you keep getting debuffed, and you run the risk of dying a lot faster, and you're also doing less damage. That's not going to happen to you so much in the second part. In the second part of this phase, you're going to have one ally is going to be targeted more often than not. What makes it easier is there's damage to only one of your allies. And here I'm going to do something really sneaky. I'm going to concentrate with Melody and just switch over to Megadolion, or however you say it. I'm going to hit with Almighty Augment. I believe I have 8. Almighty Augment 8. And I'm just going to do almighty damage every 2 turns. There are some affinities that they're weak to. If you can hit the healer with fire damage, then that's the weakness. That's the blue person. And you can also hit the purple one with physical. I know those 2 affinities, but I just mainly do what I can to heal when necessary and just keep hitting them with Almighty. It's not worth trying to attack their affinities, especially because they're going to be nullifying magic attacks every so often. So that's my strategy for the first part. And the second part of the fight is a little more difficult, but if you are really patient and you're very careful to heal and debuff, make sure that you don't let the second part of this fight, do not let the boss continue to buff itself. It will also debuff you. The best thing to do would be to raise your defense and your accuracy with Static Rook. And this is where the second part of the fight is tricky, because normally you would have your most powerful augments, so I would be able to hit weakness with anything and do a lot of damage. Because I switched those mystiques in order to help out support, which is not entirely necessary. If you have a lot of MP items, you could just waste MP away. But personally, I wanted to switch to. I thought that would be a good strategy at the time. It makes the fight go on a lot longer than it should. But basically, you're gonna need the best demons that you have with each affinity, and keep striking the weaknesses when you can. But again, I'm going to be doing the almighty damage, and there's a lot of gimmicks during this fight. The one thing you have to watch out for is a few times during the fight, you're going to be hit with an almighty attack. You'll more than likely survive it, but your party is going to be put to sleep. But if you've been collecting items, you should have enough items in your stock that will cure sleep for all allies. There are some other weird effects that can take place, like your MP will get stolen later on in the fight. At the very end, he's gonna go berserk, or she technically, is gonna go berserk, and every other turn they're gonna become weak against everything. But at the very end of the fight, as you'll see, I start getting assaulted, and I'm having to like revive my party members and heal every other turn. I'm not sure. I don't think there's an insta-kill, but I got lucky and hit with, I just one hit the boss at the very end. But they're going to keep spamming Almighty at the very end, so kill it as fast as possible. Overall, it's not very difficult. This just reminds me of the final boss of P5 Strikers, where it just has a lot of health, and you're just there for a very long time. It's possible that it's not the most efficient method, but for me, this is how I got through it. I think it's a relatively safe strategy without having to have the most overpowered demons and grind to a high level. I could be wrong, but I think I did reasonably well. It took me a long time, so I'm not going to even show the entire fight. Just want to give a breakdown of what to expect during this fight if you're struggling, so hopefully it's helpful.